You're like so quick getting in and out there. So
A little pinky.
a little panky. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Tuesday Night Live.
Yes, the best night of the week.
This is the lovely Kate Semmens. I'm Dean Nixon. We're coming at you live from beautiful, clear skies.
Hallelujah.
Welcome for the weather report every
Goodness.
week.
Especially when it's clear skies. Love that weather report.
Well, we are excited to join you and be with you again. As always, like to bring you timely life coaching topics and bring you tools and skills that you can use, as Kate would say, around the water cooler.
Yeah.
Or the dinner table, things that you can talk about as a family, and ways to move yourself forward. So we are super excited to join you tonight.
Absolutely we are. And our topic is, it's a tricky one to navigate, Dean. This idea that we're bringing to you guys today, which is really learning how to let go and surrender.
Yes.
Which, for those of us control freaks in the audience, and then this side of the camera, that's a tricky
this
thing.
guy right here.
Yeah, this girl too.
Yeah.
Right? That's an interesting, really, a skill to hone as a human being.
Yeah.
Is learning the value and particularly when to surrender, right? And when to, move forward in gusto.
Yeah.
Surrender is a hard one.
And what it's been really interesting to me, and I was super excited with the idea of talking about this today, because being a driven person, and myself, and being very driven, being very motivated, with a lot of ambitions and really, I sit down every year, as we talked about at the beginning, about mid-December, I start my manifestation, my goal setting, my what I want to create this coming year process. And so as a result of that, there's a lot of expectation that I can bring to the table. A lot of, I want to move here, I want to do that, I want to create this, I want to be involved in that, I want to, help these people with this, I want to create that. And with a lot of that expectation comes this, as you put it so well, this control,
Right.
that I want to bring into the process of really controlling how it rolls itself out, or the way it expresses itself. And what I can find myself doing is even getting to the point where I'm trying to control others, because in my mind I want it to look a certain way, and I know that if it goes this way or that way, it'll look the way I want it. And so that surrender part that we're talking about today is that ability to really find that balance between, and I love the term, and we use it a lot in our work, that balance between surrender or will and surrender. What your will is, what you're working to create, and being a driven person. Because I think a lot of times, don't you find yourself that if it's this idea of, I'm either driven or I'm passive?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Kind of getting into the all or nothing
All or
space of
nothing.
it, right? Which is the place that we love to go, right?
Yeah.
It just feels nice and cozy getting into one or the other instead of finding the harmony between something.
Yeah, really finding that balance. And I do think we kind of get to that space, and in our minds it's this all or nothing. I'm either fully driven or I'm very passive. And I even find this in self-talk through the years in seminar, like about 20 plus years ago. I remember being in our level 1 seminar and talking about negative self-talk. And I remember a young woman raising her hand, younger woman, she was probably in her 20s, raising her hand going, well, if I stop being mean to myself and saying those mean motivating things, and it was interesting, she used the term mean motivating things. And she said, if I stop using those mean motivating things, then how do I keep myself moving forward? How do I motivate myself? And it was really intriguing to me to think how we kind of do that to ourselves. We think it either has to be this very mean, motivating, leaning in, being very, very cruel, or
a bully,
or bullying, or full throttle, and we've got to go hard, or I'm never going to go anywhere. I'll never become anything. I'll never get out of this, or I'll never evolve. And that's the misconception, and that's what we're speaking about tonight.
Well, because the analogy that you use when we get into will and surrender just dropped into my mind, which I think is it's the perfect way to physically represent will and surrender, and then I feel like getting into like the how to start building that skill is where we want to end up tonight on our live. But will you, because I just know that you'd say it so well, just that like going into a slide in the car analogy, right?
Yeah. So a lot of times when you're learning to drive, you know, you sit in the driver's ed class and you watch, and for me back in the day it was the videos or the films. Nowadays it's the YouTubes or whatever.
I don't even know what they do nowadays.
I don't
Simulator, right?
Simulator. We had a simulator.
We did too.
But I remember, you know, them teaching you, you know, if the car goes into a hydroplane or a slide, you know, you want to turn into the slide, you want to let off the gas, don't touch the brake, you know, and loosen your grip on the steering wheel. And that is such a perfect explanation for the balance between will and surrender.
I love it.
Because letting yourself surrender doesn't mean giving up control or not taking a hold of control. Like it's that Jesus take the wheel I'm always joking about. It's not that. It's not like you just throw your hands in the air, Jesus take the wheel. Love that, you know, love Jesus. I'm not saying anything about that.
Love Carrie Underwood, love Jesus.
Yep, love them both. But it's that idea of my hands are still on the wheel, but I'm allowing myself to be relaxed and allow the will to adjust itself as it needs. Mm-hmm. But I'm still maintaining control of the steering, and I'm not pressing the brake. I'm not hitting the gas. I'm allowing the car to correct itself. I'm allowing, you know, it to evolve. And so I turn loosely into it. When the wheels catch, and if any of you have ever had that experience, which I have, where you turn into the slide and the wheels catch, the steering wheel automatically will correct itself and slide in your hands and kind of correct and pull you forward. If your hands are tight and the car starts to correct itself, you'll veer. But if you allow it to correct itself but not lose control, it will take you the way you want it to go. And truly, when it comes to really putting your goals and your intentions and aligning your will with your Creator and where you want life to go, that's how life is when we really just maintain that level of connection, and that's the key. We don't lose the connection, but we are there so that when the wheel is corrected, we're there to correct with it.
Right.
And to me, that's probably the best way I can explain it that I've experienced in my life. You know, that auto correction of life when I've allowed it to happen and surrendered, versus when I've tried to control it and wound up in the burrow pit.
Right. And I just thank you, by the way, for doing that as it came in. But the reason I love this analogy so much is because it pulls on those pieces that we wanted to talk to everybody about today. Because the first thing that my mind goes to is like, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable, right? Like, thank heaven I've never been in that experience yet. I've driven through some pretty sketchy snowstorms and just like white knuckled it, you know, but I've never been in an experience where literally I haven't felt like I've had control of a vehicle. But I can imagine in those moments it's uncomfortable,
it's
right?
Scary.
Like there's nothing that's like, oh, this is awesome. I can totally, unless I guess you're the best daredevil in the whole world and you're just like always doing what are those donuts things in parking lots and stuff, right? But to lose control of something like that, and to really, I mean, there's not much that you get to do at that point, right? Like that is water on the road, that is the tires, that's the car doing its thing. So it's not comfortable when life gets to that point that really suits us well to get into surrender, instead of staying in our will and staying in control.
Absolutely.
So that's numero uno, and we've done so many Monday Night Lives until we got to Tuesday night, right? About get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Learning how to lean into the discomfort when life brings those things to you. So we can talk about that a different night. That's not what we're trying to talk about tonight. Or you can go watch those other videos that we have.
Yes, please do.
But knowing that it's uncomfortable space to let go and to surrender, I think is important, because we don't ever want to be uncomfortable.
Right.
So learning that up front. And then number two we get into is that faith and hope and trust piece.
Correct.
That if I don't manhandle it, if I do take my foot off the gas, if I slow this down, if I allow for life, right, and get into that space where we just allow for some time to help course correct, that the car will do its thing, right? Like the tires will, it will course correct.
Yes.
There's got to be a level of trust that that is going to happen if I can back off.
Yeah. And when we allow that, and I think that's that great point is it really is about staying engaged in the process and really trusting the process.
Mm-hmm.
What causes us to try to control everything is the fear of the unknown. And
Absolutely.
we know as human beings, myself, probably the leader of the pack on this, is the fear of the unknown really does create that need to control the outcome, because the only place that we have for reference points is the past. So we're constantly looking in the rearview mirror, as we keep this metaphor going. We're constantly looking in the rearview mirror to really understand, well, what could happen around the bend. But that's really not a really good navigation strategy. It's really focusing on where you're wanting to go versus where you've been that really is the most powerful navigation process, because where you've been is a result of decisions you made years ago. Where you're going is a result of decisions you're making today.
Right.
So the outcome may be similar but never the same. So as a result of that, we're always trying to control the future because we're scared of the unknown. We're scared of what's around the bend. We're scared of what could happen. And so when the car starts to slide, instead of staying focused on what we're working to create, our immediate response is to look in the rearview mirror, see all the burrow pits we've wound up in the burrow pits. I guess I'm getting my hillbilly out.
A little bit.
It's my heritage. So, we get into that all the burrow pits I've been in, all the situations I've been in the past, the ways I've been hurt, et cetera, et cetera. And I get this. I have to work on this every day.
Yes.
But instead of, we can refocus our energy and go, okay, that's the rearview mirror. I'm headed this way. I can look at my maps on my navigation now, these cool cars with navigation screen. I can focus on the map, focus on where I'm going. I can let the car correct itself and keep myself moving forward.
Right. Because
the past is not going to tell me what's around the corner. It just isn't.
And this just came in too while you were talking about that. It's also really interesting to me in this analogy, right? The amount of time that a car would spend, or that a person in the car would spend being intentionally moving forward, and when we need to like ease off the gas or get into surrender, is proportionately different, right? Like, so like a majority of what we're going to be experiencing is the moving, right? Like it is the pedal to the metal, it's the steering, it's the changing lanes, it's all of those things. And it's I don't know, I guess I'm not trying to say that it's rare or it doesn't happen very often, because I do think that once you start to see when life really would have you step back, kind of get into some faith, kind of reassess the situation, allow things to re-steer, are farther, there's fewer of those times in the year, let's say, right? Or in the journey than when we're in intention.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't know why that felt important to say.
Because it is. It's very important. And that's
trying to talk about anyway.
You did great. I love it. And that's where I think, don't you find a lot of times that when we slip into that power slide, or metaphorically using our metaphor, when you kind of get into that space of things feeling out of control, the only tool we tend to use, the tool we tend to use the most, let me be very careful and intentional with my words. So the tool that we tend to lean into the most is our imagination.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And it's never like the fun part of our imagination, right? The like, ooh, how exciting could this be? A part of our imagination. It's the show me all the ways I'm going to die right now.
Right.
Imagination.
I'm going to wreck the car.
100%.
I'm going to have to call this. I'm going to have to miss work. I'm going to have to, and we just start running down this domino, imagined domino effect. And to me, the importance of this understanding and recognizing how dangerous this is, because a lot of people make permanent decisions based upon their imagination. Now, that's really critical. I hope you're listening. A lot of people make permanent decisions off of their imagination.
In a moment, that's just going to be a moment.
That it's a moment, and it's not even necessarily a truth. It's an imagination, but you're making a permanent decision. And so a lot of times we allow that domino effect to just awfulize and scare the bejeebus out of us, so that then we only have limited decision making process. Well, if A, B, C, D, E, well then I have to do this.
Right.
And instead of recognizing that, what if I just pause? And this is the part that I think is really critical. One of the tools that I have found that works very well for me is the tool of inaction, being an action. So a lot of times when I slip into that space where I want to act or do something impulsively because I'm scared, my immediate tool nowadays is I shift into inaction. So inaction doesn't mean that it's passive or letting go of the steering wheel. Inaction means I take the foot off the gas, I don't touch the brake, and I loosely turn into the slide, and I just loosely hold the wheel. So it's still an action, but it's inaction. Giving myself that pause gives me the ability to let the autocorrect happen, and if the autocorrect isn't happening, then I can intervene.
Absolutely.
But that simple pause, and I've made agreements. I remember years ago where I learned the tool was when I was running a treatment center here in town. Some of you will remember it, Sunhawk Academy. Years ago, this was back in the 90s. This is a minute ago.
Shout out to the 90s!
So it
the
was
whole decade!
It was probably 96, 97, right in there, 98. And we were getting very big. We had, our staff was getting a lot of staff, a lot of students. And it just seemed like my office was constantly bombarded with crisis, with decisions, with people that needed to be recalled, responded to, kids that were struggling, acting out, etc. So I just felt like I started getting into this reaction. And I remember making the intentional decision, and I'll never forget when one of my staff walks up and he tells me, he looks at me and he tells me something that a student had done. I think they'd kicked a hole in the wall. And I stopped myself, and I didn't do anything. I counted to 10, literally in my head. I just counted, and he's looking at me like, "You okay?" And I just stood there, and I forced myself to just do nothing for the count of 10. And then I took a deep breath, and then I responded. What I noticed was, before I started counting to 10, I already had made a decision what I was going to do. I counted to 10, and I had made a totally different decision.
Yeah.
And it was astonishing to me that my first solution probably would have solved some things temporarily, but the other decision was a long-term solution that was a better and more effective one. So it wasn't the first one wasn't a good decision, it's just the second one was better.
Yeah.
And that was a very powerful moment for me, and a real big turning point in that power of inaction, or the power of doing nothing in that moment.
Yeah, I love it. And just to grab onto that for like one more second, to me, when I hear you speak of that, or I think about the times when I have given myself enough time to choose something differently than just to be reactive, it takes more intentional energy, right? To be in surrender. It takes more self-control than external control, right? Because that grabbing onto the external or being in response and reacting in that moment is easy. Right? Like that's just like when the doctor like hits your knee and it's like kabonk, right? Like that's easy. I literally do nothing to have that experience.
Yeah.
But to harness yourself, to get into self-control and then respond instead of react differently than you normally would have as well. Woo, ladies and gents, like you want to talk about starting to get powerful.
Yeah.
Right? In that inaction, in that surrender, giving enough time. For you it was 10 seconds, right? Sometimes things in our life take longer than 10 seconds.
Right.
To sense and feel when the car is course corrected again.
Yeah.
And that's okay, right? Yeah. But it is there is a lot of action, which I love how you put that. There's a lot of intentional action in the surrender.
In the non-action, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's where that term knee-jerk reaction came from.
Well,
actually.
There you go.
There you go.
Because of the doctor.
It's a knee-jerk reaction.
Those of you on Instagram can literally see all of it as it happens.
Yeah,
because they're
different view.
Angles different.
But and that leads me to another great point that you're making is I think we get to know ourselves well enough that we can determine what we need. And I know that people in my life need longer than 10 minutes or 10 seconds. And
Are you talking about me?
I'm learning. And I love that. Like one of my very dear friends, he intentionally has learned that about himself. So anytime something very emotionally flooding hits him, he says, I cannot respond to it for 24 hours. And so he will literally force himself to not make any big giant decisions. And this is a highly, 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 highly successful individual in the business world. And so that's been a strategy that he's used. And I know, yes, with you and others that I love in my life, I oftentimes want to force a decision because for me, I can do it in 10 seconds to 10 minutes. It works for me. But others in my life, they need 12 hours. They need 8 hours. They need 24 hours. And I need to be okay with that. I need to allow their inaction to be their answer, even though I want it right now, even though I need them. And that's part of that surrender.
I love it.
Is allowing others to have their process. That's been a tough one for me as well to learn to do, is allow others to have their process of surrender, to find their truth and answer, versus where mine may come different. Just because mine comes quicker doesn't mean it's right or better or faster or the right way. It just means my answer comes differently than other people. And sometimes that's the beautiful part, is giving those people in my life, like yourself, that time actually has changed my answer that I thought I had. So it's a really cool thing to be able to learn to find that balance in your life.
Yeah, and once again, I just feel like we're back into this coping strategy of faith and hope, and I always couple that right along with trust. Like that faith piece of it, right, is just the belief and trusting that the car will course correct, right?
That's right.
Your friend will come back to you in 24 hours with what it is that he or I have pondered upon, right?
Right.
And knowing that that's going to happen. The wheel will catch.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And being able to surrender into knowing that, this is all is well.
All is well.
As we course correct here.
Yeah.
And it has been 24 minutes.
Whoa, we went way over. Well, as always.
Clearly we could talk about this topic for a long, long time.
Well, and eventually we will.
Yes.
Just so those of you that have stuck it out for the last few minutes here, one of our goals is eventually to do these webisodes encompassed with a podcast.
Yes.
And so the webisode will end and the podcast will continue as we get into, some of our deeper pieces. But that'll probably be in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, we got a lot on our plate right now. Give us a minute.
We sure appreciate you. Thank you for liking and sharing our videos. Thank you for always saying hello to us.
Yes.
If you do have topics, and we do love it when people come and stop us and go, hey, please talk about this.
Yeah.
We 100% love that. So you're more than welcome.
Yes, and to echo what you said, we love you and we hope you have a most wonderful week. We will see you next Tuesday Night Live.
See you later.
Ciao.
Ciao. I like that.
Thanks.
Like I feel so Italian at the moment.
I'm well equipped with